I'm Callie Smallwood, and this is Media Back Then. This is Debbie Palmer. She is my grandmother on my mother's side, and she is 70 years old. This is Duron Mays. He is my great uncle on my mother's side. He is also 70 years old. Whenever I interviewed Debbie about print, she said she didn't have a local newspaper, but she did read catalogs that came in the mail. Duron said that he read the Richmond Gazette. He also read Farmer's Almanac and bought all of these at the local grocery stores. When I interviewed them about the telephone, both Debbie and Duron had a party line. Duron was a little bit more vocal with how much he hated it. When I interviewed them about sound recording, Debbie said that she had a record player with 45s on it in the living room. Her favorite recording artist was the Supremes. She remembers having the Elton John album, which was the only album they ever bought, and it was for her brother. She also learned about most of her artists on TV channels like American Bandstand, The Nick Clooney Show, and Soul Train. Whenever I interviewed Duron, he said that he didn't have a record player and that a lot of times they didn't listen to music like that. When I interviewed Debbie about the radio, she said she mostly listened to music, but sometimes she listened to the Paul Harvey's talk show. She doesn't remember much about the commercials, but said most were for products. She remembers her mom listening to the obituary every day. Whenever the FM radio came out, she said it brought better signal and got more stations. Whenever I interviewed Duron about radio, he said that everything came on in the evenings after he worked all day. The main things he listened to were the Grand Ole Opry on Saturday night. The commercials he remembers were mostly just jingles that he still knows to this day. The only technical issues were when the tubes would blow and they would have to go to town to buy new ones. Whenever I interviewed Debbie about television and cable, she said whenever the TV came out, it was like day and night. There were only 3 channels, which were black and white. Watching the Lone Ranger, Roadrunner, and the Jetsons are the first things she remembers. She got their television from family members. Whenever I interviewed Duron, he said that he watched it in the living room and it was like nothing he had ever seen before. He was too old to remember the cost, but his dad worked in the coal mines and sold tobacco to get it. They got the weather and the news from it 3 or 4 times a day. Both of them agreed that the reception was horrible and they both had to go outside to change the channels on the antennas. Whenever I interviewed Debbie about movies, she remembered going to the local theater in her town because it was the only one around. She said that it mostly played cowboy movies and love stories. However, she does remember going to watch Jaws. She remembers seeing Gone with the Wind because it was a 4-hour movie. She said nothing inappropriate played at the local theater because it was geared towards kids. The most influential movies she's seen were Beaches and Terms of Endearment. Whenever I interviewed Duron about movies, he said that he didn't really watch them because they didn't have a local theater where they lived. Whenever I interviewed Debbie for internet and new technology, she says she remembers getting a Dell computer when she was in her 50s. She didn't know what e-commerce was. She wishes she could download music, but she doesn't know how. And she knows what Facebook is, but doesn't know what MySpace, Twitter, blogging, or YouTube is. When I interviewed Duron, he said he got his first computer in the 90s. Remembers that it was supposed to revolutionize the nation and make everything easier. He remembers MySpace and said he even had an account at one time, and knows what Facebook and YouTube are, but doesn't really use them. This has been my presentation. Thank you.